It was a Tuesday afternoon when I found myself wandering through the produce section of my local grocery store. You know those days when you're not really in the mood to be out shopping, but your refrigerator is practically empty and you can't put it off any longer? That was exactly the kind of day I was having. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I pushed my cart down the aisle, my mind occupied with the mental checklist of items I needed to get through the week. I had my earbuds in, half listening to a podcast about sustainable living, which seemed appropriate given my location among the fruits and vegetables. The store was surprisingly busy for a weekday afternoon. People moved around with varying levels of purpose, some darting in to grab a specific item, others leisurely examining produce with the careful consideration of someone who had all the time in the world. I fell somewhere in the middle that day, not in a particular rush, but also not wanting to spend my entire afternoon grocery shopping. I remember thinking about how grocery stores are these fascinating microcosms of humanity, where people from all walks of life converge for the simple, universal need of sustenance. It's one of the few places where you might stand shoulder to shoulder with someone completely different from you, both of you examining the same bunch of bananas. I was making my way toward the avocados, mentally planning the guacamole I intended to make that evening. There's something so satisfying about finding perfectly ripe avocados, not too hard, not too soft, a small victory in an otherwise ordinary day. I had just turned the corner into the produce aisle when it happened. The collision wasn't dramatic, just a gentle bump of metal against metal as another shopping cart connected with mine. I looked up, startled out of my podcast-induced trance, ready to offer the automatic sorry that comes so easily in these situations, regardless of who's at fault. But the words caught in my throat when I saw him. The first thing I noticed was his smile, warm and slightly embarrassed as he realized what had happened. "I'm so sorry," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't immediately place. I was too busy looking at the produce instead of where I was going. He had dark hair that fell just above his eyes, which were a striking shade of green that reminded me of, well, avocados, ironically enough. He was wearing a simple blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that suggested he spent some time at the gym. "No worries," I replied, pulling out my earbuds and returning his smile. I was pretty zoned out myself. There was something about him that immediately put me at ease, a kind of approachable energy that made this random encounter feel less awkward than it might have been. I noticed he had a few reusable shopping bags in his cart, along with an assortment of vegetables and what looked like ingredients for a proper meal, not just the bachelor-style groceries that often filled my own cart. We both maneuvered our carts to the side to let an elderly woman pass by, which brought us to the display of avocados I had been heading for. As if choreographed by some cosmic grocery store director, we both reached for the same avocado, a perfectly ripe specimen that practically announced itself among its peers. Our hands brushed against each other, and we both pulled back with a laugh. "Great minds think alike," he said, gesturing toward the avocado. "You have a good eye for ripeness." "Years of practice," I replied, feeling a strange flutter in my stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. "I've developed a sixth sense for avocados that are ready today, not 5 days from now or 5 days ago." He laughed at that, a genuine laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "That's a valuable skill. I've brought home too many that were either rocks or practically guacamole already in the skin." The eternal avocado dilemma, I nodded sagely. Too hard or too soft, rarely just right. Like Goldilocks, but for millennials and their toast, he quipped, and I couldn't help but laugh. "Exactly. Though I'm actually planning on guacamole tonight," I said, surprised at how easily conversation flowed with this stranger. There was something refreshing about talking to someone new, someone who didn't know my history or my habits. Just two people connecting over a shared appreciation for perfectly ripe produce. "Guacamole sounds perfect," he said, his eyes lighting up. "I'm actually planning a taco night myself." Great minds really do think alike. He picked up the avocado we'd both reached for and gently tested it with his fingers before holding it out to me. "This one's perfect. You should take it." "That's very gentlemanly of you," I said, accepting the avocado. "But there are plenty more. We can both have perfect guacamole tonight." I selected another avocado and handed it to him. "This one looks promising too." As he reached to take it from me, something unexpected happened. Perhaps he lost his balance slightly, or maybe it was entirely intentional. I still wonder about that sometimes. But as he took the avocado, His other hand briefly came to rest on my waist to steady himself. It was a fleeting touch, lasting only a second or two, but it sent an electric current through me that I hadn't felt in quite some time. His hand was warm through the fabric of my shirt, and I felt my breath catch slightly. Our eyes met, and there was a moment of recognition, an acknowledgement that this wasn't just about avocados anymore. He removed his hand quickly, but not in a way that suggested regret or embarrassment. "Sorry about that," he said, though his eyes suggested he wasn't entirely sorry. "I'm a bit clumsy sometimes." "No problem," I managed to say, suddenly very aware of my heartbeat. Grocery store aisles can be treacherous territory. There was a beat of silence between us, not uncomfortable, but charged with something I couldn't quite name. I became acutely aware of the mundane grocery store around us, the mist spraying over the vegetables, the squeaky wheel of a cart passing by, the tinny sound of music playing over the store speakers. Yet somehow, in this most ordinary of settings, something extraordinary seemed to be unfolding. "I'm Alex, by the way," he said, breaking the silence and extending his hand. "Jamie," I replied, taking his hand. His grip was firm but gentle, and he held on perhaps a second longer than strictly necessary for a polite handshake. "It's nice to meet you, Jamie," he said, and the way he said my name made it sound like he'd been saying it for years. "Do you shop here often?" He immediately laughed at himself. And that sounded like the worst pickup line in history. I promise I'm usually more original than that. I laughed too, appreciating his self-awareness. "I do actually shop here pretty regularly. Tuesday afternoons are usually quieter, but not today apparently." "I'm glad it's busy today," he said, holding my gaze. "Otherwise, we might not have had our avocado standoff." We continued our conversation, moving our carts along the produce section at a glacial pace. I learned that Alex was a graphic designer who worked mostly from home, which explained his ability to grocery shop in the middle of a weekday. He had moved to the area about 6 months ago and was still discovering local spots. I found myself recommending my favorite coffee shop and the farmer's market that happened every Saturday morning. As we talked, I couldn't help but notice the little things about him. The way he gestured with his hands when explaining something he was passionate about, how he really listened when I spoke instead of just waiting for his turn to talk, the slight dimple that appeared on his left cheek when he smiled. There was an ease to our interaction that felt rare and valuable. We had made our way through most of the produce section, our conversation flowing from food to music to travel, when Alex paused near the bell peppers. "I've really enjoyed talking with you, Jamie," he said, a hint of nervousness creeping into his voice for the first time. "And I'm wondering if maybe you'd like to continue this conversation sometime, perhaps over coffee or dinner." I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with the familiar anxiety that comes with new possibilities. It had been a while since I'd met someone who intrigued me this way. There's always that moment of decision. Do you take a chance on someone new, knowing it could lead anywhere from disappointment to something wonderful? Or do you play it safe, stick to your routine, and wonder what might have been? Looking at Alex, with his kind eyes and the avocado still in his hand, our unexpected connection point, I made my decision. "I'd like that," I said, surprised by the confidence in my voice. "Dinner sounds great." The smile that spread across his face was worth any risk. We exchanged phone numbers, and there was a new energy between us, the potential of something beginning. "Maybe we can compare notes on our respective guacamoles," he suggested, his eyes twinkling. "A guacamole contest? You're on," I replied. "Though I should warn you, mine has won awards." This was a complete fabrication, but it made him laugh. "Neighborhood awards or international recognition?" he asked, playing along. "That's classified information until the third date," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. "Third date, huh?" His smile widened. "I like your optimism." We finally parted ways at the checkout lanes, each heading to a different cashier. As I unloaded my cart, I kept glancing over at him, still somewhat disbelieving that this grocery store encounter had turned into something more. He caught me looking once and gave a small wave that made me feel like a teenager again. Walking to my car in the parking lot, I felt lighter somehow. The mundane task of grocery shopping had transformed into something memorable, a reminder that connections can happen in the most unexpected places and times. I carefully placed my bags in the trunk, making sure the avocados wouldn't get squished. They now carried a significance beyond their role in my dinner plans. As I drove home, I thought about how quickly life can change course. I had entered that grocery store in an ordinary mood on an ordinary day, thinking about nothing more exciting than what to make for dinner. Now, I was leaving with not just ingredients, but possibilities, a phone number, a promise date, the potential beginning of something I hadn't even known I was looking for. There's something powerful about these unexpected moments of connection. In our increasingly digital world, where so many interactions are planned, screened, and filtered through apps and algorithms, there's a special magic to meeting someone by chance, in person, reaching for the same avocado in a grocery store aisle. It reminds us that serendipity still exists, that not everything can be scheduled or swiped right on. When I got home, I unpacked my groceries with unusual care, placing the avocados on my countertop to finish ripening. I found myself smiling as I remembered the feeling of Alex's hand on my waist, that brief, electric moment of contact that had somehow changed the trajectory of my day, and perhaps more. Later that evening, as I prepared my guacamole, my phone buzzed with a text. It was Alex, sending a photo of his own guacamole in progress with the caption, "The competition begins. May the best avocado artist win." I laughed and sent back a photo of my own creation, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the kitchen. We texted back and forth as we each prepared our dinners, sharing cooking tips and terrible food puns. It felt surprisingly intimate, this parallel cooking experience happening in different homes but connected through our phones. The next few days passed with a new undercurrent of anticipation. We set a date for Friday evening at a small restaurant Alex had discovered that he thought I might like. Our text conversations continued, ranging from the mundane details of our days to deeper discussions about books we loved and places we hoped to visit someday. By the time Friday arrived, it felt like I'd known Alex much longer than a few days. Yet there was still that delicious nervousness as I got ready for our date, the wondering if the connection we'd felt so strongly in the grocery store would translate to this more intentional setting. I needn't have worried. The moment I saw him waiting outside the restaurant, that same warm smile lighting up his face when he spotted me, I knew the magic hadn't been a fluke. Our dinner lasted for hours, the conversation flowing as easily as it had between the produce aisles, but with the added depth that comes from focused attention and growing familiarity. As he walked me to my car afterward, his hand found mine, and I was struck again by how natural it felt. Standing beside my car, he tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and asked if he could kiss me. The gentleness of the question matched the gentleness of the kiss that followed. A perfect first kiss that held both tenderness and promise. Looking back now, I'm amazed at how a simple trip to buy groceries changed the course of my life. If I'd gone shopping on Monday instead of Tuesday, if I'd been a few minutes earlier or later, if I'd chosen a different aisle or a different store altogether, the entire trajectory might have been different. All the tiny, seemingly inconsequential decisions that led to that moment of connection. I often think about the role of chance in our lives, how we can plan and organize and strategize, but sometimes the most meaningful things happen when we least expect them. A bumped shopping cart, a shared reach for the same avocado, a steadying hand on a waist, small moments that can open doors to entirely new chapters. This isn't to say that every grocery store encounter leads to something lasting, or that finding connection is as simple as bumping carts with an attractive stranger. But there's value in remaining open to the possibilities that exist in everyday moments, in remembering that meaningful connections can begin in the most ordinary of circumstances. Alex and I still shop at that same grocery store, sometimes together, sometimes separately. We've developed a tradition of buying each other the perfect avocado when we go solo, a small reminder of how we met. And yes, we did eventually have that guacamole contest. We both maintain that our own version won, though we've since created a hybrid recipe that combines the best of both approaches. Life is full of unexpected encounters and connections waiting to happen. They exist in coffee shops and bookstores, in dog parks, and yes, in grocery store aisles. The key is to be present enough to notice them, brave enough to acknowledge them, and open enough to see where they might lead. So the next time you're going about your routine errands, remember that extraordinary beginnings can hide in ordinary moments. That person reaching for the same book you're interested in, standing in line behind you at the coffee shop, or yes, bumping your cart in the grocery aisle. They might just be a conversation away from changing your life. Or at the very least, they might introduce you to a better guacamole recipe. Either way, it's a risk worth taking. Total underscore char underscore count, 17,902.